There we go. The other obvious is that it's been a busy weekend. You just had a big meal. You are sitting down and you may feel like a nap. I'm going to try to move quicker and finish earlier this evening, and then you can go home and hopefully you'll have the nap there instead of here. Robert Turner once said that if everybody who slept in church was laid end to end, they would be more comfortable. All right. Early child training. Proverbs chapter, so we'll try to avoid that. I'll try to keep moving, make it interesting, and be shorter. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. This is going to be our theme verse for the next few lessons. Training up a child. I want to say a couple things about this before we go ahead. One is, I believe this is a truism. There's a difference between a truism and an absolute. Proverbs has a number of truisms. These are true principles. It doesn't mean you can never find an exception, and let me illustrate. Proverbs 15:1. What does a soft answer do? Turns away wrath. What do grievous words do? Stir up anger. Is that true? Amen. Has there ever been a time where soft words didn't calm down an angry person? Yeah. Maybe the person's drunk or on PCP or something, and you tried some soft words, did no good at all. The exception doesn't change the fact that it is generally true. Have there ever been grievous words that calm somebody down? Yeah. When some police officers and a big German Shepherd dog came and caught some people, sometimes that has calmed them down even while they're yelling that at them to get down on the ground. So there might be an exception to this. This doesn't mean that God takes away our free will, but there's great truth in it. And I want to begin with an illustration for you parents, especially you dealing with little ones. I know that your goal and mine is to have our children serve the Lord. Let me tell you what has been my goal for a long time. My grandchildren serving the Lord. For a long time back, that's been my goal. I could tell my children were going to serve the Lord. I wanted my grandchildren serving the Lord. I want what my dad has. Dad is 90. He's still doing good work. He does teaching and preaching, and he's been working with young people and being effective. And every other year, we go to my dad's for Thanksgiving. We had 6 kids, and so I knew when they were little that if we didn't get a plan, it'd be hard to get everybody together at the same time. So I let them know, when you get married, you let your spouse know that odd number of years you're with us for Thanksgiving. That way they get to be with the in-laws for the even. My brother and his family got on the same system. And so this year will be the odd year. I think it'll be 52 people will be at Dad's house. That's Dad, his sons, grandkids, and great-grandkids, including, son and daughter-in-laws and stuff like that. And it's always a joy. All of the adults are Christians. The kids are all well behaved and headed in good directions. I would like that when I'm 90. I don't want my grandchild calling me saying, I'm in jail again, can you bail me out? I will say no. Sleep it off here where you put yourself. But I don't want to go through that. And here's an illustration I'd like to share with you. I want you to imagine you've got a legal pad. If on the front of that legal pad you put love God and love your neighbor with a ballpoint pen, if you don't bear down, you can clearly read it on the first page, right? But when you turn the page, you can't see it. What happens if you really bear down and make a deep impression when you write it on the first page? Once that first page is gone, guess what? The ink is not there, but the impression is there. It'll say, fear God, love God, and love your neighbor. And if you really made a deep impression, you know what? It'll be on the next page, and the next page. Now, you know as well as I do that as you start turning those pages, it's going to get less and less of an impression that you made, and eventually it's gone. How many of you, show of hands, know your mother's father's name? 1, 2, 3. You see how quickly we forget generations past? But here's what's beautiful. I don't need my great-great-great-grandkids to remember me, because I'm not their Lord and I'm not their Savior. But if I teach my children to love God with all their heart and all their soul and all their mind, and to love their neighbor as themselves, guess what they're going to be teaching their children? And guess what their children are going to be? If they each make a firm impression, then it doesn't matter when my impression is gone. Because what's going to be happening? If they take it to heart and make a firm impression, they'll keep adding to that, so that when our descendants don't know us, and everybody, a lot of people here are the result of somebody 5 generations ago that decided to serve the Lord, and we might not know their name. So keep doing that. Make firm impressions. All right. Proverbs 29:15. A rod and reproof impart wisdom, but a child who is unrestrained brings shame to his mother. Another translation says, a child who gets his own way brings shame to his mother. In the Bible, we have really more examples of bad parenting than good. There's Lot, who chooses an environment that doesn't end up being conducive to his family. There's Jacob, who shows favoritism, and that has some issues. There's Eli, who his sons are being evil and wicked, and he says, why do you do what is evil? And the message is given to Samuel, let Eli know that because he did not restrain his sons, and these are adult sons, because he did not restrain his sons from doing evil in the priesthood, he's going to die and his sons are going to die. That's pretty lousy parenting, but you know who did worse? Look at 1 Kings 1:6. David was old, verse 1, advanced in years. He's about to die. This would be sad. You're about to die, and one of your kids is not thinking about honoring you or respecting you, but just taking over the throne instead of the one that's supposed to take over. And that's what happens here. Look at verse 6. Adonijah. Now, who's supposed to be king? Solomon. David's about to die. Solomon's next in line. Adonijah decides he will be next in line. Adonijah, the son of Haggith, exalted himself, saying, I will be king. And he prepared for himself chariots and horsemen and 50 men to run before him. Why would he do that? Why would he so disrespect his father and disrespect the throne and disrespect his father's wishes that while his father is about to die, he decides to usurp the throne from what's supposed to happen? Read the next verse. His father had never at any time displeased him by asking, why have you done thus and so? All of a sudden, Eli looks not quite so bad. Eli was a terrible parent, but Eli at least said that thing. Why do you do evil? He didn't back it up. Seems more like a whine than we're going to do something about this. Why do you do evil? David never even said that to Adonijah. He got to do what he wanted to do. He'll end up meeting a grisly end. eventually. Jonadab, don't have time to talk about him, but he's interesting. You can read about him in Jeremiah 35. He influenced his family. Jeremiah was told to call for the Rechabites, and the Rechabites, as a family, had some extra rules. This is kind of important. They had rules that they honored as a family. They weren't necessarily Torah rules, but they were family rules. There's nothing wrong with having family rules, okay? When I got to Garrett's house, I asked, are y'all shoes on or shoes off inside? Because I want to respect the family rules of the house I'm in. Some people want the shoes off. When I go in a house like that, I take my shoes off. Some people say you can leave your shoes on. A house like that, I leave them on. But I respect the rules of the house I'm in. Don't make the mistake with your little ones of letting them think that every family rule is a God rule, so they look down on people with different rules. Some of you may have a TV in your home. Some of you may have decided it is not worth it, and you don't have a TV in your home. Well, the ones without a TV will probably have some great benefits. The ones with the TV can also have some benefits if they use that TV carefully and with thought. If you let anybody watch anything anytime, you're going to have issues. But the fact is, it doesn't mean that this family is approved by God and this one isn't. That can be a family rule, okay? So don't be afraid to make rules in your family. Sometimes the difference between a good father and a bad father, or wise father and unwise father, is a son or a daughter starts getting into something that they shouldn't, and instead of nipping in the bud because you're seeing a bad direction and too much interest in something, they'll think, well, it's not absolutely sinful. There's not a verse that says you can't do that. You're the parent. When you start seeing your son's heart stray from God, and he's not interested in good people and good things, and he's infatuated with ungodly things, and the posters on his wall reflect that, don't say, well, it doesn't say posters are a sin. No, you step in and you realize direction, and you make a family rule and say, no, we're not doing that. So Jonadab had a lasting influence on his descendants. Lois and Eunice had a lasting influence on Timothy. But this is where we want to start focusing our time: early child training. Train up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he will not depart from it. Over 30 years ago, or about 30 years ago, Judith Harris wrote a really horrible book called Do Parents Really Matter? And it was on the nature versus nurture argument. And I think most of us probably know what that is. If you've had several children, would you agree that different children are born wired a little bit differently? Some come in with a certain type of personality, or certainly, yes, there's some nature there. If you've had several children and you've been raising and training children, you also know that it makes a huge difference if you do the training or not. The nurturing makes a huge difference. This book argues that basically the nurturing is nothing, and it's all nature. She argued your child will be who they are based on two things: their DNA, their genetics, and their peers. You don't make a difference for the most part. Parents don't matter. This is what she was arguing. And it was reviewed in one of the main news magazines at the time. And the reviewer, fortunately, you could tell that they realized this was not a very good book, but they described the book, and it basically said that, parents just don't matter, except for this. Because your child is controlled by genetics, which you can't do anything about now, and they're controlled by peers, here's what you can do. Make sure that you make enough money to live in the best school district so that they're with the best peers. Let me tell you something. The children of the richest people in town are not necessarily the best kids. There's flaw number one. Number two, it said make sure that you make enough money to dress them in the latest fashion, because appearances are important and you wanted them to be accepted by their peers, and braces or plastic surgery if necessary. That's what you can do as a parent so that they'll be influenced by the right peers. I got to thinking about that, and to an extent, I think there's a little bit of truth to it. And you know what I think it is? I think it's true for parents that don't spend any time with their kids. If you don't raise and train your kids, and if you don't spend time with your kids, then guess what is going to influence them? Their peers. And now, social media, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we're to influence our children. Those children are given to us. They weren't given to the internet. They weren't given to the school. They were given to us. So, time issues, a garden. How many of you are planning to put in a garden this spring? Or maybe you're already started, all right? Now, let's suppose you put in a garden and I put in a garden. And you take the gardening seriously. And that means that every week you spend some time out there weeding. And sometimes you see we're not getting enough rain, and so you water it. Or you see there's a rabbit that's been coming in, eating some of your garden, and you put up a fence around it. And you're tending your garden and you're nurturing your garden. I put in a garden and then ignore it. Harvest time, what's going to be the difference between my garden and your garden? It's going to be a lot of difference between your garden and my garden. And if I say to you, well, you're so lucky, you just had good vegetables. You were lucky. No, you weren't lucky. You spent time in your garden. You protected your garden. You nurtured your garden. I planted seed and ignored. It's going to be different crops. Cats, birds. How long does a kitten need to be with its mother? Think about that for a minute. We had a stray cat show up on our porch, and I was amazed what a good mother she was. One time she came and she brought a live mouse to the little fairly newborn kittens and dropped it in front so they learned what to do. It was really cool. But how long does a kitten need to be with mama and daddy cat? Daddy cat is often not in the picture, which is a lot reflective of society today. How long do they need mama cat? Not very long. Bird. Robins. It takes the babies about 2 weeks to leave the nest or fledge. Then they usually stay with their parents for 2 or 3 weeks after that. It's a little baby right there. That's a small baby, but I believe it's more than 2 weeks old. What are you still doing with that baby? What you're doing with that baby is you being the mother to that human being baby, because we're not birds and cats, and we're not raising birds and cats. A bird needs to learn how to fly and eat a worm, and he's pretty much ready to go. Our babies need to learn a lot more than how to fly. Well, they can't learn that, but how to eat a worm. There's a lot of lessons. There's a lot of moral responsibilities. How long has God given us, our children, to be dependent on us? Not 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, not 2 months, not 2 years. God made our children so that they are dependent on us for years and years. Guess what? We should be using that time, not neglecting that time and ignoring that time. I one time saw statistics, hard for me to believe, but if I remember it correctly, it was one of the European countries, and it said fathers in that country spent an average of, guess how much time with their sons each week? 15 minutes. Then don't expect to have any influence. on your child. Our children need our time. Let's proceed. Early child training. Early child training in the word no. What are the first words that a baby learns? So those of you that have babies or recently had babies, I'm going to guess that some of those babies, their first word was mama. I'm going to guess some of those babies, one of their first words was no, as far as understanding or being able to speak. It's one of the first words that we learn. And it's a really, really important word. It's important to use it right, and it's important that it not be used wrong. For instance, when mom says, no, no, baby needs to understand, oh, that's a no-no. I'm not to pick that up. I'm not to do it. But when 4-year-old goes, no, that's not to be tolerated at all. In fact, let me tell you this. When I was a teenager, 17 or 18, there was a couple things I decided I'm not going to have in my home. And one of them was, I'm never going to have kids that go, no. And we started having kids in 1984. I had one born in 84, 88, 92, 97, 2000, and 2004. The one born in 2004 is now in his second year of college, so we're just now going into empty nest. I did not have kids that went, no. I will not guarantee not a single one ever did it once. But if they did that, they found out they were not to do that again. This is a really important word. Think about this. The importance of the word no. Genesis chapter 2. God created man and Adam and Eve. How do you imagine Adam and Eve looked? Age-wise. I assume Adam looked full grown, and I assume Eve looked full grown. How old are they? How much wisdom do they have? They don't. How much experience do they have? They don't. They're new to the world. And God gave them a rule. What was it? You can eat any of the trees of the garden except this one right here. This one right here, this one is a no-no. No, no. That's basically what's going on there. You shall not eat of this tree. I was thinking about the other day, we were discussing sin and why they would choose to do that. The garden sounded like it was a big, beautiful place, bunch of trees. If you hadn't said no on that one, it might have been a good while before they ever stumbled across it, you know. But once it was a no, then the tempter comes along, and what does Eve do? She sins and Adam sins. And that's it. And they're kicked out of the garden. They were very immature, and God started them off with a no. Let's move on to a different group of people. These are full grown, and they're real adults, but they are a very immature generation. The Israelites coming out of Egypt. I had a fellow tell me one time that the greatest commandment in the Bible was, the greatest commandments were the 10 Commandments, and the greatest of all the 10 Commandments was keep the Sabbath. I know that's not true, because my Lord was asked what's the greatest commandment, and he didn't quote from the 10 Commandments. He quoted a positive commandment from Deuteronomy 6, love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. He said the second greatest was Leviticus 19, love your neighbor as yourself. Vertical, love God more. Horizontal, love your neighbor as. Those are the two greatest commandments. All the other ones hang on that. That's what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 22. What were most of the 10 Commandments? Most of them were negative. You shall not make a graven image. You shall not have other gods form it. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not kill. You shall not covet. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not steal. What does it say in Romans chapter 13? It said, if you love your neighbor, Leviticus 19, you won't do any of those. You won't kill him. You won't sleep with his wife. You won't covet his stuff if you love him. So Paul says in Romans, if you just do this, that'll take care of all that. So why were these commandments necessary? Because we people can be pretty immature. Let me illustrate very simply. Let's suppose we had 20 3-year-olds and we were all going to go somewhere on a hike and we wanted somebody to watch the 23-year-olds while we're gone. And one of you says, I'll watch them. Now, when I let other people watch my kids, I also let the other people correct my kids. I was talking about this, I was doing a series on child training one time, and a gospel preacher said, it's important to tell our kids they don't have to obey anybody but me. I said, no. So they don't need to obey their Bible class teacher or their teacher at school if they're in a school or something? Listen, and if you say, well, I don't know what people are going to do. If you don't know what people are going to do, then don't leave your kids with them. I'm not going to leave my kids with you if I don't trust you. But if I leave my kids with you, I'm going to let you correct them. But suppose somebody says, oh, we're not going to have any problem at all. I'm going to explain to all the 3-year-olds that we're going to have respect and kindness. That's not going to work because they're 3. You're going to have to get down to some specifics. No hitting, no kicking, no biting, because they're 3. And the Israelites needed some specifics. No killing, no committing adultery, no coveting, no bearing false witness. These are important principles. Respect and compliance for the prohibitory, no. My first daughter's first spanking, I still remember it. She's in the bathroom, and she gets the toilet paper, and she's just doing it like this. And Bertina goes, April, no, no. And she took her little hand, and she said, no, no. And April's little heart was broken, and she cried, and she stopped doing it. This is a little bit hyperbole and a little bit exaggeration, but to a significant point, I really mean this. If you get your small child to understand and respect it when you say no, and for them never to give you a defiant no, half of your parenting is already done. I don't mean years-wise. I mean you've already laid the foundation that almost everything else a lot else can be built on. If you don't get that, you're going to have issues and issues and issues and issues and issues and issues. But once you get that 1.5-year-old, when they're told no, they go to grandma's house and they start heading for something that they're not to be touching, and mom goes, no, no, and they turn away and they do something else, a lot of your work is done. There will be many, 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 many more challenges to face, but the fundamental is there. Let me explain why. By the way, let me say this also. If you don't mean it, don't say it. If you do mean it, enforce it. I had a friend of mine in high school, and he despised his mother. She was a pretty good woman, but she would start with, no, you're not, no. And then he would argue with her, argue, and finally she would say, well, all right. And one time he said to me, he was about 16, he said, the only reason I don't slap my mother in the face is because I know what my dad would do when he got home. That's pretty sad. Yeah. Can you imagine if your little child ever felt that way about you? But it was annoying because she would just kind of start with no. It doesn't mean you're a good parent because you say no all the time. You shouldn't say no all the time. There should be lots of yeses. Dad, can we go out and play ball? Yes, we can. I've got to finish this right now, but in a little bit, we'll go out and play ball. Dad, can we have pizza this week? Yes, we can. There should be lots of yeses. There should be lots of joy and fun. Not every time, but there should be lots of yeses. It doesn't mean you're a good parent because you said, no, 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 no. Can I play in the road? No. Can I play in the yard? No. Can I play in my room? No. Can I breathe in and out? No. That's not a good parent. But if you say it, what did Jesus say about yes, yes, and no, no? Let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Here's why this is important. And think about this for your various kids, okay? If you've got a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, 16, think about this. Basic vocabulary lesson. You need to teach your child that this word right here means this right here. I know I've defined it by the word, but we know what no means. If you have a little guy and he thinks this means throw a tantrum, you haven't done your job with him yet. You've got some work to do. If your child thinks it means the defense attorney may now cross-examine, you're not doing it right. And you got to back up and teach them what no means. If they think no means don't do it while mom and dad are watching, you haven't got it done right yet. If your child understands, oh, mom said no, I'm not to do it, a whole lot of your work's already done. And here's why. When your child understands that when you said no, they are not to do it, they have learned respect for authority. They may be 1.5 years old, but they have learned to respect authority. Dad said no, and he walks away from it. Mom said no, and they put it down. They've learned to respect authority. Is that going to benefit them during their teenage years? Is that going to benefit them in their adult life? Yes, and you've already taught them that. Here they are as a baby. Here's what else they've learned. I won't always get my way. The child that learns respect no has learned both of these things. Number 3, that baby has already learned, although he can't say these words, behavior is more important than desire. I wanted to pick it up. I wanted to eat it. I wanted to walk out in the street, but mom said no. And it's more important that I do what mom said than what I wanted to do. And that baby has learned self-denial and self-control. I want to illustrate this 2 ways. Elders, other brethren, have you ever noticed in a church, whether this one or another church that we're in years ago, have you ever seen a member of a church that didn't seem to have understood these 4 things? Have you ever seen a grown man that doesn't have respect for authority? Have you ever seen a grown man or a grown woman that doesn't understand they're not always supposed to get their way? Have you ever dealt with people in a church who seem to think their desire is more important than their behavior? Have you ever had to deal with people who don't know how to deny self or won't deny self? You know what Jesus said in Luke 9:23? If you want to follow me, what's the first thing he said you got to do? Luke 9:23. If anyone would follow me, you must deny self. Take up your cross daily and follow me. Those people are people who were not taught to do this way back when they were 1 and 2. It's huge. Second way to illustrate this. One kid has learned throw a temper tantrum when you're told no. One child has learned to argue and try to be a cross-examining attorney to try to get their way. One learned to sneak around and do various things like this. The other child learned, Dad said no, so it's no. Fast forward, they're both 16, 17. They go to a party. They're offered things that they shouldn't be offered, whether pharmaceutically or beverage-wise or physical and fleshly-wise. What's this child going to do? They haven't learned to control themselves. They haven't learned that behavior is more important than desire. They haven't learned they don't always get their own way, and they haven't learned to respect authority. What are they going to do? They're going to make really bad choices. This child over here, they've known since they was a child to respect authority, and they know God's word. They know that they're not always supposed to get their way. They know that behavior is more important than desire, and they know that they need to control themselves. Is that going to benefit them when they're 16? It's a huge benefit. That's why I say, and I'm not saying your children will never sin. We all sin. What I'm saying is, when you teach your child to respect no, like Adam and Eve needed to learn to respect no, and the children of Israel needed to learn to respect no, you have laid the foundation for more mature obedience later. They don't have to understand everything. A 1-year-old doesn't have to know why they can't just run across the street to get a ball. But when that ball rolls out into the street and they start toddling out there and mom says, "No, stop." And that training has them stop. They didn't stop because they understand what a 4,000-pound car does to a 2-year-old. They stop because they've been trained. And there's going to be other dangers besides that 4,000-pound car. Teach your child to respect no. And sometimes people feel selfish because when you're dealing with a little one trying to teach it no, and it really, 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 really wanted that, and you're saying no, maybe it's a poison berry and it thinks it's a grape. It's saying no, they want it so bad, And sometimes it's something innocent. The parent starts feeling guilty, like they're doing something wrong. Like, well, I said they couldn't have ice cream before supper, but they want it so bad. Now they're misbehaving. Now we got to have some discipline. I wish I would have just let them have the ice cream. I don't want to be selfish. Let me just give them the ice cream. No! There's something more at stake here than whether or not they get ice cream. It's that they learn that they do need to respect the parents' no. You're not being selfish when you train your child. Here's what you're doing. Learning to submit to an earthly father prepares the child for submission to a far more important father. So do your job. And don't say no all the time. Have lots of yeses. Can we have this? Yeah, let's do that together. Can I have some of this? Yes. Ooh, could we have homemade ice cream? Hey, that's a good idea. Let's have lots of yeses. Have fun with your kids. But when it's no, teach them that it's no. Respect and compliance for prohibitories at no, and a zero tolerance for the defiant and rebellious no. When they go, no. They need to find out that is never, ever going to be tolerated. And we'll talk tomorrow about the rod and reproof. Don't just talk to them about it. There needs to be some punishment. Don't just punish them. There needs to be some talking about it. Take it very seriously. Let them see how seriously you take it. And this is not to happen again. Avoid upside down homes. We talked about a young couple going out to look for a house. Let's suppose they come out and they see this house. And they say, yeah, I want to see that. They want to see what the countertops are like, how many bathrooms it has. But you know what? If you pull up with the realtor this, nobody wants to buy that. But I'm going to tell you what, there's no houses like that around here that I know of, but America is full of homes like this because it's run by the kids. Let me tell you a story real quick. This is about the 65th time I've done this series. I was doing this down in Birmingham one time, And somebody there told me this story, and I thought, that I'm going to start using that. It makes a good point. I didn't know if it was true or not. So whenever I introduced it, I would say, I'm not sure if this is a true story or not. And I did that until I got to Manchester, Tennessee. And Sarah Bain Bunting was in the audience. And she told me afterwards, it is a true story. Bob Bunting, her husband, was the one that saw it. And she told me a little bit more about it. She told me where it happened. It was in Florida. So it was probably late 50s, maybe early 60s. Here's the story. He's there for a meeting. People have plenty of money, nice house, interior decorator, nice and everything. Nice drapes. None of them were in place. They've all been pulled down by the little tyrant. And at breakfast time, the little tyrant, I don't remember if it's a boy or a girl. I think it might have been a girl, so I'll go with female, but it could have been a boy. And they've cooked breakfast for the little tyrant, and when they gave it to her, she goes, I don't want it. And the adult said, what do you want? And the child said, I want a worm. The adult went outside and dug around in the dirt until they found a worm. And they brought the worm in. And the tyrant said, I want it cooked. They put the worm in the skillet and they cooked the worm. They brought it to the child. I want you to cut it in half and you eat half of it. They cut it in half and the adult ate their half of the worm. Now what do you think happens? If you think the child happily ate their half and said, thank you very much, you are mistaken. They reverted back to not wanting it. They wouldn't eat their half of the worm. What foolish people. That child needed somebody to be an adult. That child was not old enough to be running that house, and they were. Don't have a house like that. Children thrive with love, attention, training, boundaries, and discipline. They thrive with it. If it's just harsh discipline and there's no love, that's a different thing. But if it's just, whatever you want, a child who gets in his own way and is unrestrained brings shame to his mother. The child needs to understand it's not child first, then parents, and then God. Nope, that's not how it works. God's the first, dad's the head of the house, mom's the queen, they're down here. They can be the prince or the princess, but this is the pecking order. And that helps us establish a house that's set on serving God. The husband is the head of the house. The wife is also ruling the house, and the children are to be obeying. The rod and reproof being wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. All right, that's a good stopping point. We're going to pick up in the morning with parenting pitfalls. Thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.